Hey guys, what is going on? It's Sven here again. So today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on hair and hair dynamics because someone requested it and I thought I would do it because I wanted to do this before but I just didn't have the time. But now I have the time, so might as well get it done. So I'm going to go over the creating the hair first because in Cinema 4D it's actually very difficult to extrude things in a 90-degree angle for some reason. I have no idea why, but Cinema 4D doesn't have the best modeling tools out there. For me personally, the best modeling application is 3ds Max and it's just flawless, although a very good one is also Modo. But we're using Cinema 4D, so we have to work with what we have. And generally what you would do is, let's say we have an object here like this cube, and what we want to do is extrude some of these edges. So I'm going to make it editable. I'm going to grab the live selection and select these two edges. Now to extrude this, you would right click and you would go to extrude and you would extrude this out. Now one of the problems that you will encounter is that the edges are joined up, and that's because of the maximum angle. So it's basically saying if the angle is low, then it won't actually join these up because the angle is not at what it says. Now if you look at this kind of angle, we need to accomplish a 90-degree angle. So if we bring the maximum angle up to 90, you can see we actually get the 90-degree angle, which is really nice. And it does work in most cases. However, when you do it with a complex object, such as, let me just give you an example here. I can just, let's see, what do I need to do? Delete the cube to start off with because we don't need it. And then what we've got here is I actually need to go into here and delete this for a second. And basically this is what we got. So if we select all of these and if we just add the extrude to this as well, this is one way you can do it. Just by extruding itself, you see we get some pretty decent results, and that is probably one of the ways that you would just actually create this. Now you can add caps which will basically cap the inner. Now the other problem you're going to encounter with this method is the fact that the lines aren't particularly straight. They do start to warp to some degree, such as here at the front. So you would have to go in and manually adjust these. It's not going to be perfect. None of these methods are going to be perfect, but that's pretty much some of the things that you will have to encounter and adjust. Or if not adjust, just have a look and see, are they a big issue, yes or no. So that's the only way I could really suggest of doing this. So let's take a look at our next method, which is this one here. This one is a relatively decent method. If we render out, you can see we get some really nice results. There's a few things that we will have to do for this in order to make it realistic. One of them being that when we finish adding the deformer, we have to scale the model. As you can see from the front, he doesn't have any hair. So what you would have to do is you would have to actually grab the hair, and then you would have to go into the scale, and we would have to scale this out like so. So this kind of gets the back of the hair and of course the front of the hair. Now what does this method involve? Well, simply put, it involves adding an explosion FX tag. So if we turn this off, all we're going to get is some normal hair. So it's basically a flat polygon. A little bit difficult to see, but let me turn off the face and this is practically what you get. So it's nothing fantastic, it's just a very thin piece of hair. Now when we add the explosion FX to this, there's a few things that you do need to change. So let's turn it on. In fact, let's actually just add a new one. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to click on the head, and then I'm going to go over to the effectors, and I'm going to add an explosion FX. I'm going to drag that underneath there, and all is well. So first thing you'll notice is it's actually disappeared, and the reason it's disappeared is because over here in the cluster, and these are a few parameters that we do need to change. The thickness is the thickness of the hair. So if we go into the object first, and it's got a time here at 10%, we need to bring this down to 0. Now if we go over to the cluster, you can see a thickness of 10 centimeters gives us this really thick hair. If we start to go out in a negative value, we seem to get this crowning on the top of the head, which could be adjusted if you made this editable, went into the points and adjusted it slightly. It's going to take some work. There's no way around it really. So what I like to do is I actually like to bring it in the positive, and then that way the kind of bowiness is inside instead of outside. And as you can see, we have a really nice flat area here. So that's pretty much what you have to do. But now if we actually turn the head on, you can see, because I've already scaled this head, normally what you would end up with is the hair something like this. So it's actually inside the head. So all you would have to do then is grab the actual scale tool and just scale this out slightly on both axes. I recommend doing them individually so you don't mess it up, but something like that. Again, this is as good as you're going to get. The only issue you're going to have is this area here. And the reason this happens is simply because of the way these corners are constructed. If you happen to get rid of these corner pieces here and just delete them and then go into the point mode and then just optimize it, if we put this on, you'll see that we'll get some different results. We'll actually get a better corner than we had before. So it is dependent on your actual hair geometry, but it's also dependent on a lot of other things. So this doesn't look too bad. It still looks a little bit weird because I haven't deleted everything. But you kind of get the gist of it. So that is one way, and that's probably the easiest way to get the hair for your characters. So let's go on to the next method of creating hair, because this one is the most simplest way, but it comes with a lot of issues. So this method is basically using a cloth NURBS, which will allow you to add thickness, because in other applications they normally have something called a shell, which will allow you to do this very easily. I'm pretty much referring to 3ds Max here where I say shell, because they have a modifier called shell, and it does exactly what it says. It basically makes a shell out of geometry, so it kind of gives it thickness. Now the closest thing in Cinema 4D is the cloth NURBS, but unfortunately you just do not get decent results. Now this probably would work really well if you were using a smooth bends in your character, but because I use rigid bends in my rig, it doesn't really look good. But if you're using a smooth character, then this could work pretty well. So I guess it's really down to what you're making. So the cloth NURBS is pretty self-explanatory. We've got subdivisions here. You don't technically need any subdivisions. I've just put them on just for the lols. The factor basically means how strong of original shape it's going to take. If we put it up to 100, which is the original, it's going to kind of get bulgy, and you can see this by adding subdivisions. If we bring this down factor to 0, we're going to get very close to a straight line, but it's not perfectly straight. So again, the only way I could suggest fixing this, if you like this method, would be to make this editable, go into the point mode, grab all these points and basically copy the Y coordinates and make them all the same height. That's probably one of the ways you could fix it quite easily. It will take a little bit of time, but they're the two methods that I know of, and you know, they're okay, they're not bad. Again, they do require a little bit more extra work from the get-go. So that being said, let's have a look at hair dynamics, because the person asked if I knew how to do warp hair, and what I assume that means is dynamic hair. So I've got two methods here. We'll have a look at the method 1. Now method 1 basically uses cloth NURBS. It uses cloth dynamics. Cloth is really good, but it can eat up calculation times, so it probably is a good idea to do your animation and cache it out rather than trying to let it render out, especially if you don't know what the animation is going to look like, because you could do the animation and the hair could just start artifacting and going crazy through the animation. And if you start rendering that out, you've just wasted 5 hours because it's going to be useless. So it's always good to cache your hair first. And if you don't know what cache means, it basically means clicking on your tags and going down here to cache and calculating the cache. What that basically means in a nutshell is it's going to calculate the animation and then it's going to allow you to play in real time, which basically means you're going to catch anything that's happening, because when you play, let's say for example, if we hit play and we move this, you can see if we move it like that, we're going to get a lot of this weird artifacting, and we would be able to see that a lot more clearly than in this example here. So this method is, well, pretty much very straightforward. What you do is you create, I'll just take one of these off here and I'll show you. So basically this is what it looks like at default. In fact, let me just undo that and get these back to default. So let me remove these. So let's say you have a hair particle or hair geometry, which is this. It's basically just a cube been extruded 6.25 centimeters, and that's pretty much it. So this is my head and these are some pigtails, for example. I want to basically add on this hair, which is this one here, right click, go down to let's see, it's going to be, forgot what they are, simulation tags, and we're going to add a cloth. And then we're going to right click, go down to simulation tags and add a cloth belt. Now what the cloth belt will do is it will allow you to stick specific points to a specific mesh. So in this example, we want to highlight these top 2 points and we want them to stick to this cube. So it's saying, what points do you want selected? So we've selected these 2, we can hit set. Now these are set, and now it's asking us, what do you want it to belt onto, which basically means what object do you want these points to stick to. We want the actual head, so we grab the head and drop it into the belt on. Now if we go back and hit play, it's not working, so we need to go back and make sure the points are going to be selected here. So now we've got our object, let's hit set. So we need to do it the opposite way around. So it basically means we need to belt on first, so just drag the head in here first, then grab your points and hit set. You can tell when they're set because they will go like a bright yellow. So that being said, let's press play and this is what we get. So it looks a little bit weird. If you want low poly, fair dues, it looks cool, right? So you can see the differences here. Maybe this one doesn't need as much geometry as the other one, but let's just continue. So what you can do is grab the hair, hold Alt and go up to Simulation, Cloth Dynamics, Cloth, and then use Cloth NURBS. That's going to drop the hair into the actual cloth NURBS. Now again, remember before on the hair, we have to reduce the factor and it will keep its original shape. It's very noticeable here. So we want to add maybe 2 subdivisions. We could try 1 and we can basically just, have a look. Now you don't need any thickness here. And the reason you don't need any thickness is because it's already got thickness. You would only add thickness if it was a plane, like a cape or something like that. So let's go back to the beginning and hit play. And this is pretty much what we have. Now you can see these 2 look completely different, and the reason it looks different is because in the actual cloth tag we've reduced the forces. In this case it's the actual gravity. So we've put it at 0.5, which basically means it's not going to be pulled down as much. It's going to have some weight to it, but hair doesn't have a lot of weight to it. So if we wanted to, let's say for example, grab both of these tags so we can affect them simultaneously, and we can basically, let's say, add some wind here. So as you can see, the more wind we add, let's increase the strength by something like that. And you can see we get this now. Now perhaps that's too strong, so let's put this down to maybe 2. And let's put down the strength to maybe 0.7. So there we go, we got some really cool looking hair now. And of course you can add turbulence and all that kind of stuff, and it will drastically reduce the animation or increase it depending on what your settings are. Excuse me, my throat's a little bit blah. But that's pretty much the method of using cloth, which can be very, very ideal. It does work really well. Now if you wanted this to collide on something, you could make something like this. Let's put it down to 20. And we could pop this in front of these. Let's say something like that, and then we could make it editable. Right click, go to simulation tags, and then we can put on a cloth collider. But before we do that, let's bring it back to the beginning, and then let's add it now. So cloth collider, and then we can hit play, and this will collide against this object. So if you want to keep your hair in a specific area, you could use this. Really helpful, so keep that in mind. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hide this again, and we're going to look at the second option here, which is a little bit different. This one is based on spline dynamics, which basically means we're going to be using this tag here, which is called spline dynamics. Now the way this works is you add a spline, which would be your original spline. So if we just control drag this down here to make a new one, and drag this over. Now we need to add a sweep NURBS to this. So we will go into this this tab. I forgot what it's called there. The vector tab, if you like, and then we can go and make a spline. Let's make something like one of these instead. And then what you want to do is you want to create a sweep NURBS here. We want to drag the spline in, and then drag the shape above that, which is basically telling us that this will be run across the spline. So we can reduce this drastically, something like so, increase the size if we want, and then what we can do is grab this and we can drop it onto the head. And the reason we drop it onto the head is because when the head moves, this will move with it, because it is actually parented to it. So if we want to position this a little bit better, we can grab this and move it down, move it across, something like that. And then we can go to the actual spline here, and it's already got the spline dynamic tag on it, but if it wasn't on there, which it probably won't be for you, just right click and go down to hair tags and use hair dynamics. Now you can also use the hair collider, which is pretty much the same. So if we actually grab this cube, we can delete that tag off it, maybe bring it back, and right click here and go to hair and put a hair collider on there. So that looks pretty cool. Now one thing I've noticed is this hair has gone, and I'm curious why. It's because we haven't fixed a point. So go into the hair tag, go to the properties, and we want to fix a point. So it's asking you what point do you want to fix on this spline. Well, for us it would obviously be the top one here. So once we've got that, we'll go back onto the spline tag and just hit set, and if we press play, you'll see that they'll stay still now. So let's just increase this to 900 frames, and I'll give you a kind of a glimpse of what this will look like. So I'll grab the move tool and I'll move this across, and as you can see, it does interact with this object, which is pretty cool. So that's another way that you can basically make hair. In some respects this is a lot better, it's a lot faster. You do get some artifacting. It depends how you create your geometry. You could actually go into, let's say, these splines, and you could reduce or change the intermediate points to something natural, uniform. Subdivided might work, and of course you can increase these as well and hit play, and of course you could go back to the head and you could move these, and you can see you get a different results depending on what subdivisions you have and all that kind of stuff. So they do look really cool, and they do interact really, really coolly as well. So yeah, that's pretty much the methods that you could use. So hopefully this tutorial was informative for you guys. I know I kind of went through it a lot faster. I'm trying to make the tutorials a lot shorter because a lot of people aren't watching them all the way through. Analytics are really cool to look at, so I am trying to make them a lot shorter. But let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.